Hello, and welcome to Booked Solid, New Canaan Library's podcast for adventurous readers across all genres. I'm your host, Kathleen, a collections librarian.
I'm your host, James, an adult services librarian.
And I'm your host, Kat, a children's librarian.
And today we are talking about Horse by Geraldine Brooks.
Horse is our pick for the 2023 Lit Lunch. Unfortunately, tickets are sold out, but feel free to pick up a copy from the library to join in on the conversation.
And before we start talking about this book, let's just quickly go over the book introduction. This is adapted from the author's summary. A discarded painting in a Washington, D.C. junk pile starts a journey through American history, as seen through the lens of the life and legacy of an American racehorse and those who cared for him. In 1850, an enslaved groom named Jarrett forges an unbreakable bond between a newborn foal that will lead to glory and tragedy on the racetracks of the South and beyond. An artist who makes a living painting horses encounters Jarrett and eventually takes up arms as a Union soldier. In 1954, Martha Jackson, a galley owner, becomes obsessed with a 19th century equestrian oil painting. And in 2019, Theo, a Nigerian-American art historian, and Jess, a Smithsonian scientist from Australia, are brought together by a chance encounter linking them to the horse. This is a story about a horse, science, art, obsession, and our unfinished reckoning with racism.
As always with Book Solid, we will be spoiling everything from Horse across all of the disparate timelines in the book. So if you don't want to be spoiled, go away, read the book, and come join us when you're done.
All right, so what did we all think about this book?
You know, I liked it. It's not my typical genre of choice. I read pretty widely, but this sort of historical fiction doesn't tend to be what I reach for the most, but I liked it. Yeah, I thought there were a lot of parts that were really detailed, which we'll get more into shortly.
Yeah, I certainly think there's so much to like in this book. There's parts that are standouts and we're going to be excited to talk about. I also usually don't tend towards historical fiction like this, so I was pleasantly surprised with all the parts I really found myself enjoying.
I am going to make a confession right now, which is that I'm not a big fan of horses.
Ooh.
Yeah, so the idea of picking up this book, I was a little apprehensive because I was like, how much time can I really spend with a horse? How engaged can I be with the story? But I think one of the things that I really liked about this book, and that really made it a more enjoyable read for me, was that the horse is one element of it, and I loved the way that it was woven through the different timelines, the different themes. But there were also different pathways in and different things going on. There was some mystery, there was historical fiction, as you talked about. So looking at all of those different pieces, the details of all of them, I was drawn in. And of course, I want to let everyone know, of course, by the end, I had warmed up to the horse. So,
wow.
Yes.
This book must be pretty magical then, if it could warm you up to the horse.
Well, I mean, Lexington's a pretty special horse, so...
Maybe we should start with Lexington then.
All right.
With Jarrett.
Yeah, that sounds good. So Jarrett is a groom in 1850 who is present for the birth of the horse that will become known by the name Lexington. It was born with a different name, but is changed as its owners change throughout his life. And Jarrett is an enslaved person. He was born enslaved, and his father is a freed slave at this point and is working to get enough money to buy his son's freedom. And he and his father both work tending horses for Dr. Warfield, who is among other things, has a horse breeding program and tries to raise racehorses.
I really was moved pretty early on in the 1850s portion. That's where the book really grabbed me, specifically because of being in Jarrett's headspace. He's someone who deeply connects to all horses, every horse he meets. And we see him in striking contrast to a lot of the white people interacting with horses who tend to believe that they should break them in, often violently. Jarrett understands early on that horses, though they're like bold and strong and incredible, are often very scared animals. And he treats them with a level of gentleness and reassurance that kind of endears you right away, I would say, to him as a character.
Absolutely. I'm in total agreement with that. The relationship between Jarrett and specifically Lexington, but also Jarrett's understanding of other horses is a standout in this novel. There's a section later on in the novel where Jarrett and Lexington are separated because one of Lexington's new owners trusts his care to another man who does not believe that an enslaved person like Jarrett has anything to offer and separates them. And that moment in the book feels so fraught. I've been reading reviews for this, And a reviewer specifically mentioned that this moment felt like an existential crisis, and I was in complete agreement with that at that part. I was flipping past entire chapters trying to figure out what would happen. So definitely that relationship is extremely well done in this.
And I think as well, Brooks really elegantly uses the relationship between Jarrett and Lexington to discuss the ways both of them are sort of seen as bodies to be exploited by the people who consider them their property.
Yes, commodification is another theme in this book that is necessarily has to tie in with the fact of slavery's existence in the 1850s South, what it means when people are viewed as property, people aren't viewed as fully able to pursue their own life. Instead, they're viewed as a thing that is meant to generate value and prestige. And there's a very, I feel, a purposeful comparison between the idea of a racehorse and what it does for an owner, and what an enslaved person means to what it means to be an enslaved person to an owner. There's an interesting comparison there, because, for example, for Lexington, he's a point of pride for his owners. He's a valuable creature who is strong and is brave and all of these great characteristics that are valued by the people who own him. But he is also seen overall as really just a commodity. He is a thing that only exists to generate that value and prestige, and in so doing, very possibly he'll be raced until he dies. You see it happening in the 1850s sections of horses dropping dead during races because the owners are just pushing them to deliver more and more without really caring about the animal itself. And when that happens, it really kind of pulls aside any of the illusions that the reader has about the great care and love and affection and respect that these gentlemen racers have for their racehorses when they're dropping like flies because they've not been able to deliver sufficient value for them to, pull it back.
And Jared is actually, I think, the only person who will go over to an opponent's horse's groomsman or owner and be like, you need to make your horse stop racing because they're going to die. And of course, he's not listened to.
No.
I will say another thing that I really appreciated regarding the 1850s portion is anytime a work is going to tackle historical slavery in the American South, you're going to feel a lot of dread and horror at the reality of that system. And I think Brooks really elegantly sort of counterbalanced that with narratives of enslaved people resisting the circumstances they were in, from planting, from Jarrett's sequence learning how to read, from the ways in which other enslaved people pull him aside and say, don't mess with so-and-so, that will lead you to trouble, here's where you should go, I'm going to make food for you. The way that they're able to express care, and the way Jared is able to express care, even for Lexington, shows a sense of resilience, I think, that really humanizes everyone involved.
Yes. And I think it also serves to further illustrate just how corruptive the institution of slavery is in this time. When you're in these sections, it touches everything in the book. There's no part of it that isn't being touched by this thing. It's corrosive. It touches business, relationships, travel, who people can and can't talk to, the way that which you talk to people, just how you're seen as a class, regardless of everything else. It's everywhere. It's inescapable, and Brooks is definitely highlighting just how ingrained this was to literally everything in order to perhaps clue the reader into some of the ideas that she's working with when it's saying, what kind of residue might this system leave behind in American history and it going forward?
I think as well, one last aspect of sort of the commodification, we see it in horses, we see it in people, and we also see the commodification specifically of art. This paintings that are bought and sold and appreciated and not appreciated by different people. One thing that I always think about is the fact that people often sell paintings of Lexington, but those who have a personal connection to it often feel sort of wary of selling it. Someone like Jared, for example, treasures his painting of Lexington for a really long time. Martha finds herself unable to part with it as well.
Yes. There's a great quote from the historical painter, but this is an imagined quote for the purpose of this book as far as I'm aware. Thomas, he meets Jarrett and is talking about why people are willing to spend so much money on paintings of horses. His hypothesis is, all men are equal on the turf or under it, that's the saying. But the folk who own the horses, it's much more for them than an exciting day out. Here's the ground of it. As I see it, a racehorse is a mirror, and a man sees his own reflection there. He wants to think he's from the best breeding. He wants to think himself brave. Can he win against all comers? And if not, does he have the self-mastery to take a loss, stay cool in defeat, and try again undaunted? These are the qualities of a great racehorse and a great gentleman. A gentleman likes to have a horse that gives the right answers to those questions. Then he can believe that he will give the right answers too. To do my part, I have to give a man a likeness that shows not just how beautiful the horse looks, but how beautiful it feels to him. Which Jarrett responds to in an interesting way, where he says that, you don't need to be a gentleman to feel like that. After seeing Lexington be born, it makes him feel hopeful, like the future's going to matter more than it did the day before he came, which is kind of a beautiful, not even like a rebuttal to it, but just a natural kind of response to, yes, there's something majestic about this horse.
Yes, and I think as well, one thing it comes to that Jarrett's saying is you don't have to view a horse as property or know that you're going to make money off a horse to find value in it or see yourself in it.
Jarrett's relationship with Lexington never feels extractive.
No.
Every other kind of character who is working with the horses in an ownership role, it seems like it's a purely extractive relationship. Jarrett has a lot of moments where it feels like he is trying to see the interiority of Lexington, watching him play, getting to know what he's trying to feel and working with those instincts rather than trying to force other ones upon it.
Yes, and I think Brooks's strength here as a researcher really comes through in these sections. There's a lot of care shown to understanding horse behavior, training methods, historical and contemporary, historical terms for food and clothing. And you can tell she read a lot of primary source texts when it comes to describing like locations specifically.
Absolutely.
I think that's great. It's so funny when you were reading that quote too, and I'm kind of thinking about, I'm certainly not on the side of these people buying and selling horses and running them to death and things like that. But I think the interesting thing about how she creates all of these characters is she is able to kind of capture and describe what they would be thinking or what they would be feeling or why they're willing to participate in a system where some of them even express maybe some skepticism over it. They might have some objections to slavery, but ultimately still end up participating within it because the benefits for them, maybe outweigh giving it up. So I think it's really interesting to just see how entrenched someone becomes, and they're unsympathetic characters. But I think at the same time, she is able to look at people even beyond the ones that we do want to identify with and that we do want to feel sympathy for, so that even when we don't agree with them, we're understanding what made them this way or why they feel this way.
There's no clear, this is why so-and-so is a good person and this is why so-and-so is a bad person. It's rather, what is their level of complicity within a system that is touching everything? Someone like Thomas J. Scott is really interesting. His first chapter, he says, I'm a free labor man, meaning he's ostensibly anti-slavery, and yet...
When I read that, I was like, okay, when you say free labor man, do you mean that you are pro having labor that is free to you, or are you pro having, people not being enslaved? I was holding my breath for that.
Right, and he travels south, and he's like, the only place I can get work to paint horses, which is what he does for a living, is on plantations. And he's a character who, from the very beginning, is wrapped up in a system that he ostensibly disagrees with, yet is making money off of.
I mean, he goes to war against it.
Yes, eventually.
Yeah.
And his arc I found really satisfying.
Yes.
Do we want to talk about a different era in the book, maybe? Kathleen, I know you really liked some of the 2019 stuff.
So getting into the book, starting with the 2019 stuff, I think was very helpful for me because, as I mentioned, I was a little wary about how am I going to get into this historical novel about a horse and the world of horse racing, all of these things, not necessarily my preferred pathway in. So what I thought was really fascinating is that we also have this 2019 section of the story, which has sort of a mystery framework. We have these two characters, Theo and Jess, who are both coming to Lexington in two different ways. So Theo is an art historian, and he discovers the painting, and he's wondering who this horse is. And then Jess works with bones, and she's been given the task of actually reassembling the bones of Lexington properly because they've been poorly put together. He's been in storage in the Smithsonian for a number of years. People have forgotten about him. And so we see them and their enthusiasm, their interest for the horse. So I thought that was a great pathway for me to see why Lexington is special and to have that kind of, well, I'm intrigued and I want to know more. And then seeing him in the past then, it's really interesting to get the full story, I guess, which is more than they get to see.
I think as well, it's really excellently paced because sometimes in the 2019 section, we will know more as a reader about Lexington than Jess or Theo do, and other times they will now know more than we do, so we'll learn something about Lexington's future exploits that we haven't even reached in the book yet.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting too, like speaking about knowing things as well, specifically in the 2019 section, in the 1850s section, as Lexington is rising to become this champion, you can feel like there's an excitement around him. People are excited about this horse. As in the 2019 section, they kind of stumble across his skeleton in like an attic somewhere, and then someone else has to say, do you know what you have here? And Jess, who's one of our point of view characters in the 2019 section, says, not really. And she's like, this is like the sire of the champion racehorses. This is Lexington. And he was forgotten. And Brooks is doing, well, she stated that what she's doing here in some senses is she's connecting the fact that how could this great champion horse be forgotten in our present? What else might have been forgotten from our past? Like what other contributions to our history might have been forgotten? She says also, when she was writing this book, she says that as she was researching it, she says that you can't really write a book about racehorses in this time period without acknowledging the fact that so many Black groomsmen and people who worked in that industry were completely forgotten because either they were enslaved and their contributions were not counted as anything, or even after the war, their contributions were actively suppressed because of resentment from the losing side of the Civil War, being like, we don't want these people in this industry, get them out of here. So as the people in 2018 are learning all about them, and then we're taking our trips back into the 1850s, it's just there's so much building about this moment and this incredible creature in the story.
And you have to wonder as well, if Theo wasn't present, like would Jarrett be remembered? It's worth noting that many of the historical characters in the book are based on historical people.
Yes.
Jarrett is a name that is mentioned, but we actually don't know much about him.
Just his name, I
Just
think.
his name, I believe. So Brooks did a lot of imagining of that. And Theo, as a character, is able to come in, and because of his background as a Black man, he's able to come in and point at what other people, specifically Jess and the other horse historian, are missing.
Yes.
Which brings me to Jess and the other horse historian, another running theme within the book, which is the theme of white femininity specifically. We have 3 white women in the book, Mary Barr, Martha, who's in the 1950s portion, and Jess, who have awkward, uncomfortable encounters around race. Jess most notably when she first meets Theo, but in general, the 3 of them are experiencing sort of a bit of an awakening when it comes to the realities of race in America. And all 3 of them, unfortunately, at the start especially, will center their own feelings of discomfort or embarrassment instead of making it about making amends to whoever was wronged. All 3 of them hold some sort of power over Black folks near them. So Mary Barr is the granddaughter by marriage of the person who has enslaved Jarrett. Martha has a Black housemaid, and Jess is at the Smithsonian and could hypothetically block Theo's access to the painting if she wanted to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very well done, especially with Mary Barr in the 1850s sections. Whenever she is interacting with Jarrett, there is a palpable tension for the reader because at any moment you can feel like this is going to break so badly for Jarrett. Mary's probably going to escape most of whatever consequences might happen from this interaction she's having, but Jarrett is going to be destroyed by this. This is going to ruin or end his life immediately if anything about this gets out. And the interactions they have are genuinely pretty harmless. They're not even in a relationship, nothing like that. She just comes out to talk to him sometimes or sneaks out and he discovers her. It's so dangerous for him. It's just like a Tuesday for her. And
we know that Jarrett, when we're in his perspective, he feels that danger like a live wire.
Yes.
He's very, very cognizant of it, as is Theo in the 2019 portions. It's also worth noting all 3 of them are pretty complicit in everything until it becomes personally relevant to them, I would say, until they have a personal reason to confront race. Their privilege has sort of blinded them to it.
I think it's interesting that there's a level, I guess, of obliviousness because none of these characters are adversarial, which is a point that Brooks makes. But at the same time, she's very deliberate in showing that there is just this, I think, oblivious element, this element of doing things without being aware of that broader context, the possible consequences, and the harm that they could do.
She pretty expertly kind of calls this tension into being and then lets you linger with it, and it's uncomfortable, and it does happen.
Exactly. And I think that there's a lot of strength in having characters who aren't consciously malicious kind of be our guides, because that's frankly much more relatable and much more the experiences of a lot of daily encounters with racism are people who aren't consciously being malicious. They're being oblivious. They're being ignorant.
Mm-hmm. There's a couple things that I'd love to call out. They don't really fit anywhere else, but I love when it comes to research, Geraldine Brooks, again, She has done some extremely good research for this book across all time periods. She's got things in the modern day talking about how like taxidermy is prepared in Smithsonian, things like that. There's like a room full of beetles.
I love the beetle room.
That clean off bones.
I would love to go to the beetle room.
I want to go to the beetle room.
Ooh,
like
no.
what a great little detail to put in there. All sorts of great anatomical detail about how horses work, the skeletal structure, the way that they run, all that stuff. So I just want to definitely highlight that is a highlight of this book for sure.
Yeah, her strength as a researcher really shown. Even in Thomas J. Scott's perspective, that is the one that feels most like a primary source. Mm-hmm. Reading it, you can tell, again, she read a lot of primary sources because she captures the voice very well.
Certainly she's fictionalized some of his life for the purposes of this book, but definitely, yeah, everything, it does feel like it's super genuine.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that is one of the things that really impressed me is just her ability to bring a fairly distant past to life. And this is pretty much par for the course with Geraldine Brooks. All of her books are different historical eras, but she's really able to do the research and then craft it into a story and then have all of these really vivid stories of different historical periods.
Well, if you're craving more books like Horse by Geraldine Brooks, we do have some read-alikes for you. The first one is for those of you who enjoyed the 2019 portion the most, and that's Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reed. This is a 2019 novel, I believe, about a black nanny working with a white family. The white parents have a family emergency in the middle of the night. They're answering questions from the police, and they ask their nanny to please take their young child, I believe she's under 5, to the corner store so that she isn't traumatized by the events of the evening. While she's at the corner store, someone sees a black nanny caring for a white child, and they assume she's kidnapped the child, so they call the police. Many things unfold from this situation, but it is about interpersonal relationships. It's about relationships that come from nannying and caregiving in the home, and it was an absolutely propulsive read. I couldn't put it down. The next is How the Word is Passed by Clint Smith. This is a nonfiction book by the poet Clint Smith, which explores how we remember the historical period of slavery in America, as he takes a tour across historical landmarks and cultural monuments and things like historical reproductions on plantations to explore how we remember that period of history. The third is Homegoing by Ya Jessie, which follows 2 Ghanaian sisters, one of whom takes the Middle Passage as she is sold into enslavement, the other of whom marries a British slaver, and it follows them over several generations. It's a pretty short novel for being a multi-generational novel, and it was another one that I really couldn't put down. And last but not least, for those of you who are just here for the horse, sorry Kathleen, we have Rough Magic, Riding the World's Loneliest Horse Race by Laura Pryor Palmer. Laura was 19 when she decided to, on an impulse, on a whim, without any training, join a massive race in Mongolia where you ride a series of like 25 different ponies across the steppes, sort of mimicking Mongol mail currying, I believe. And again, she had little to no training. Most people train for years, so as you can imagine, a very exciting book.
That is a fascinating premise.
So, what are we reading next, Kathleen?
All right, so next month I'm very excited. We're going to be reading Killers of the Flower Moon by David Grann. So this book was pretty popular a few years back, but it's back in the mainstream now because the movie by Martin Scorsese is coming out. So I'm really excited for the movie, for the book. It's about a twisting, haunting, true-life murder mystery, and it takes place in the 1920s in Osage Nation in Oklahoma. So basically, oil was discovered underneath their land, and the Osage became very wealthy. And as a result of that, unfortunately, they started being killed off one by one. There's this conspiracy that we discover through the course of this nonfiction text. And it starts out sort of with the perspective of this woman, Molly Burkhart, who watches her family get murdered. First one sister and then her mother. So you're wondering what exactly is going on, who is behind this, what is this conspiracy? And that's when the FBI comes in. And so we have a former Texas Ranger named Tom White who starts to unravel the mystery. And it's just a fascinating story about a really terrible thing that happened, but it has so much about both the Osage Nation and the start of the FBI, and I'm really excited to discuss it with you guys.
I'm very excited to actually read this. I haven't had a chance to read this before, so this will be my first time reading this book.
I read it right when it came out, and I'm so excited to reread it, and even more excited to go see the film. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, I guess that's it from us here at Book Solid Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.